Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Megan Gittoes.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Megan. I'm an Associate Fellow for GLOBSEC, and I'll be moderating this session, Is Anything Sacred? Protecting Children in Armed Conflict, in partnership with the Emile Foundation. Before I introduce the session and invite the panellists to the stage, I do want to remind you that you can engage at the end with some questions, or you can submit them on Slido. If you do have a question, please, when you ask it, no statements, just introduce yourself and your question and highlight if it's for a specific panellist. So our global order is undergoing seismic shifts. International institutions face growing challenges. Long-standing treaties and agreements are being tested and political relationships fractured. Amongst growing conflicts, important questions arise on how children caught in armed conflict can be protected and how advocates can continue to defend international law and the rights of the child. So please join me in welcoming our panellists. Fawzia Koofi, President and Founder of Women for Afghanistan and former Vice President of the Parliament of Afghanistan. Mariam Lambert, CEO and co-founder of Emile Foundation and member of GLOBSEC Women Leaders Council. And Tim Nelson, CEO for Hope for Justice. So, Mariam, I want to kick off with a question for you. Through your work with the Emile Foundation in Ukraine, you've supported displaced and vulnerable children and families not only just affected by conflict, but caught in the complexities of hard and tested diplomatic relations. Particularly in the case of those impacted by Russia's deportations, from your perspective on the ground, what do you see as the most critical gaps in international community's response to protecting these children?
Thank you, Megan. I just quickly want to say thank you to GLOBSEC for bringing this conversation into this conference, because of course, we are talking a lot about geopolitics and defense, but behind that, there is a human being and also children, most importantly, children. So thank you, Megan, for bringing this up. To respond to your question, it's a very complex question, but I will try to be very brief as well. For the last 3 years, Russia has invaded Ukraine, and it's still invading Ukraine. For the last 3 years, Ukraine bravely fought for its survival. While, the rest of the world are still hesitating, even some countries today. But in Russia, thousands of Ukrainian children are targeted by the Russian Federation to wipe out their identity. We are talking about 19,546 children who were identified by Ukrainian authorities as being deported. And the Russian Federation is claiming to have saved 700,000 children, which we will come to that later. What doesn't work and what can be done in this whole mechanism of return? We know, for example, that country mediators like Qatar are helping return a handful of children, which is a tiny fraction of those stolen. But the United States could truly step up as a true mediator, based on their success stories for children in Boko Haram, for example, in 2014, when 250 girls were kidnapped. So, because 48 countries today joined the coalition of Bring Kids Back, they are trying their best to really trying to put in place a mechanism of return. And it's not about their failure, it's about the fact, which we need to understand. Russia doesn't listen to European talks. It responds to strength. And this is why the United States, with its unique power, could use their success stories and truly drive this mechanism of return. Now there are some quick wins which we could apply today, like a handover protocol to quickly move children from armed group to children protection under the UN mediators, to also improve the better data system. What I mean by that, it's a unique idea that leaks all information for each child. To also think truly about what does it mean reintegration. The Paris Principles say that reintegration means more than returning children home. It means counseling, it means access to education, it means housing for the families who are returned. So it's a very long-term scenario. And I will not be long because I promise you, but you know, all what I'm describing today, Russia is gaining from our lack of coordination. Because we are doing today, and we start to talk today about what needs to be done, something that we should have done in day one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Tim, I'm going to go to you next. Of course, outside the devastating human cost to armed conflict, children face a particular set of challenges with exploitation. Can you tell me about what more needs to be done, both on the ground and at a policy level, to prevent children from falling through the cracks in this way, particularly with your experience with human trafficking?
Yes, so the issue of human trafficking, modern-day slavery, is so vast. The best estimates are nearly 50 million people across the world are held in some form of modern-day slavery, and really it's a vulnerability that meets a promise, and those individuals are tricked and trapped. So in the same cases we're talking about the children of Ukraine, we can see all over the world, there are many different examples of how children are groomed and they're brought into domestic servitude, sexual exploitation, they're brought into all forms of labour exploitation itself. And there's a real need for countries across the world to come together and for standard legislation to try and address this. Not just really good legislation that's really well worded, but the enforcement of that legislation. 84% of the world sits outside of the rule of law, and therefore there is a need for us to see legislation almost sweep like a tsunami across the world. And then when you start to bring active agents, NGOs who are working in this space, people who desperately want to try and help, you start to see political will shift. And we've seen that grow significantly across the world. There's far more of a recognition of what human trafficking, modern-day slavery is. But really, if we're going to try to protect the most vulnerable, we're going to need a cohesive and coordinated plan. We're going to need governments to work together. We're going to need NATO alongside the big governments across the world, the G20, coming together to say, not on our watch. There is a Palermo Protocol that was created in the year 2000 and enacted in 2003. There's a real need now for a redefinition of that Palermo Protocol, and we're working with UNHCR and ODC to try and address this issue. But fundamentally, if we say that legislation shifts, we see far more enforcement of those rules and regulations and holding people to it. So when we see an action like this, we really need people to step up. You know, I'm fed up of politicians sitting on their blessed assurance and doing very little to address this. It needs people to catch the fire, to address this fully, and to say, if this was your child, you would definitely do something about it. And they are someone's child. So therefore, we all should do something in this area.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Fawzia, as the first woman to serve as Vice President of the Parliament of Afghanistan, you bring a particularly unique voice to this. Fawzia was also a key female voice in the peace negotiations with the Taliban, so you've witnessed firsthand how conflict and political transition impact the most vulnerable, particularly women and children. Based on your experience, what are the most urgent lessons the international community must learn when it comes to protecting children's rights in fragile, collapsing states?
Megan, I think with the escalation of violence in different parts of the world, as we see now, as we're talking, this issue of how to protect civilians, not only women and children, that are often used as a tool of war, not even collateral damage to war, is a serious discussion, because often civilians are used as a shield, as a weapon, but also as a, as I say, tool, collateral damage into conflict, but also in negative peace. Because it's not only conflict that takes away the lives and the rights. So we're not only talking about the lives that, you know, hundreds and thousands of civilians, women and children being the most vulnerable, are taken away, but also their rights. I can give you an example of, Afghanistan, which is probably the most known conflict to everybody because most of us grown up with this conflict. I was born in maybe 2 years or 3 years before the conflict started in Afghanistan, and I have spent all my life in conflict. There are people who were born in conflict and they probably will die in this conflict. Recently, like after 2001, there is somehow negative peace. The Taliban uses a propaganda that there is safety and security, but not every peace is a positive peace. If you do not really go, when it comes to peace negotiation, if you do not really ensure that the peace after the conflict means that people have the right to breathe without the fear of being bombed, but also being suppressed, then that's a peace. Because not necessarily, as I said, the outcome of any negotiation is a positive peace. I have seen that in the case of Afghanistan, and there are now familiar words that I hear in the case of Ukraine. Ukrainian-owned, Ukrainian-led peace process. These were the terms that we used 2-3 years ago, not very long ago, in the case of Afghanistan. Afghans-owned, Afghans-led, peace process. I think that the whole dynamic of mediation spectrum is changing. Now there are non-traditional actors. So when my friend was talking about G7 and big countries, I was smiling a little bit because I don't know how much impact in peace negotiation the G7 countries have anymore, honestly speaking. You refer to the role of smaller states like Qatar, UAE, Oman, for instance. Some of these countries actually are negotiating the challenging environment. Civil society and NGOs are working on behalf of the governments. So diplomacy spectrum and also, peace negotiation, there is a whole new dynamic to this. What we need to do is we need to make sure that in all of this, there is accountability, transparency, and inclusion. And leadership. Inclusion is very important to make sure that there are women and children and youth part of the process. Yeah. And victims of war, part of the process. This year is going to be 25 years out of many UN resolution, is going to be 25 years of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women inclusion. You have seen some of these recent negotiations between, the conflict parties. How many of them are women? We're talking about ending violence that is affecting women and children without including women. I believe if there were more women in the negotiation representing the Republic of Afghanistan, we would have certainly avoided the collapse to the extent that it happened. We had to struggle with our foreign diplomats, friends, with European representatives, with American representatives to ensure that there are women. We had to convince them to include women. So when it comes to women and youth and children, there is a lot of hypocrisy, I must say. And therefore, I think we need to now go towards this use of non-traditional peace negotiators and see how they can practice to ensure that there is an inclusivity and avoid use of children. Because it's not only about the numbers. The psychological effect of war is so intense and so devastating that you talk to any girl in Afghanistan or any boy, the first word you exchange, the second word is with tears because they're all traumatized. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure this is the case in Ukraine, this is the case in Gaza and any other conflict. So we need to stop this, and we have a responsibility to stop the war, but also stop a negative peace.
So I want to thank all of you for those answers. Our panelists today have different but really unique experience and perspectives. So for the next round of questions, I'm actually going to be asking you all the same question. In recent years, neutral third parties, that includes NGOs or smaller states, as you've said, but NGOs such as yourself, have faced growing criticisms for engaging with all sides in conflict negotiations or for ceasefire negotiations. These sides, the reason for this criticism is sometimes these sides include hostile states or non-state actors such as terrorist organisations. Whether these criticisms are justified or not, the legitimacy of an NGO's role within diplomacy is being increasingly challenged. So do you have experience with this, and how vital is their involvement? Tim?
Yeah, I grew up in a very unusual environment. I grew up in Northern Ireland. My mum was Principal Private Secretary to the Northern Ireland office. We had a car bomb planted outside of our house. So I know what it means to grow up in a world where people have opposing views and terrorist organisations fighting for what they see as freedom. I think when we consider the role of an NGO, the people who get involved in NGOs are people who are passionate about wanting to see the world differently. And there should be a kind of sense of care and concern for NGO leaders who are desperately trying to battle against lack of resources, lack of people, and a desire to want to make a bigger difference. I've said to our team that the world that we don't enter is the world we cannot reach. So if we're in a space where we're trying to provide stability to children, trying to provide stability, we should do that at all costs and hold them right at the centre of our thinking and our priorities. If we do that, we do it in a different way. So we've had extensive work in team through Ethiopia. There's an armed conflict going on in the northern Tigray province. One of our centres in Bahadar, we had armed shelling probably less than 3 miles away from where the centre was. Not being able to reintegrate children into a war-torn space creates real problems, but we have to be willing to reach across the aisle, even though we don't agree on every aspect of what that organisation or individuals agree on, and say we can all agree that it's not right that children are exploited. We can all agree on the fact that we want to live in a world that is different to what we have. So there has to be a sense of us willing to not go on our moral high horse, which I see lots of individuals doing, but be willing to take a step down and listen and understand and start discourse. So I think it's wrong for any person to sit throwing stones from the outside in. We need to be grown-up individuals who are willing to pull up a chair around a table of reconciliation to have the difficult conversations that need to be had.
Thank you. Mariam?
I don't like personal question because then it shows emotions. And we are strong women and men, and we should just talk about fact because emotion doesn't bring peace. But I'm a mother of 3 children, and I had I was blessed in my life, luxury life, and I'm talking about 3 years ago and not 20. And I could just, watch all this armed conflict. I think we're talking about 100 children armed conflict in the world, and feel sorry and show you some support just to feel good about it and go to bed and have a great life. But the moment you decide to get out of your comfort zone and to become a human rights defender, you know that you will face the most challenging life. So from 20 years as a European civil servant and a beautiful life, I became a human rights defender, but also on the ground. And the moment you see children, the moment you experience drones attack, me personally with my team, we were to Ukraine 72 times. Our brain, our heart is not trained to see those atrocities. And the moment you experience that, you know that nothing will stop you, because you promised those families that you will do everything to bring those children back, but you will also speak on their behalf. Because living in a country where you are silenced by the war, silenced by bureaucracy, it is our moral duty to really speak on their behalf. So for the last 3 years, we faced everything you could imagine. False accusation, being accused, labeled as espionage as well. It is normal, it is a war zone. But I believe that all this experience, accusation, it's because it's a system that we are shaking. Why? Because it doesn't work. For 3 years, we are trying to set up the mechanism. We are trying to return children. We are trying to provide them with aftercare, which it's not completely applied. So we need to shake this system in order to get all together, as you mentioned, human rights defender, journalist investigator, the government, civil society, all together to break the ice and to really work on a proper mechanism of return together, and use us as well to speak to other countries. The backdoor diplomacy still works. We've been visiting 27 countries, thanks to our sponsor, in order to talk about the situation of the Ukrainian children as a non-Ukrainian person, because we have experienced that, we have evidence, and this is what we are talking about. So yes, it is really challenging, but anything, if it was too easy, everybody will do it. And I think the challenge is teaching us to learn from it and to never, ever give up until it's done.
Fawzia?
I thought I have the headphone. On this issue of engagement, who do we engage to, how do we engage, is probably the most controversial issue when it comes to any conflict or any peace process. This is definitely the case in the case of Afghanistan, because, of course, you're dealing with a group that has been, in the sanction list of so many, institutions and organizations, including the UN, have committed suicide bombing, killed people, civilians. As I said before, I have grown up seeing people killed in front of my eyes. My family member, recently, when I was member of parliament, I could see, people that I helped them to join the army or police because they wanted a recommendation were killed 2 months later. Their dead bodies were brought to their family, because of the war by the Taliban. They attacked me twice. I was lucky to survive both times. The last time was 4 years ago. In a month time, it will be the 4th year that I was attacked, injured in my right arm. But nonetheless, I believe that the way forward to control dictators is diplomacy, definitely. We need to talk. But it's also very important that who do we talk and what do we talk? Because not necessarily any kind of engagement means that you're resolving an issue. Some engagements could mean that you're actually empowering the non-state actor, which is not supposed to be empowered. And this is so true in the case of Afghanistan, when the United States started engagement with the Taliban bypassing the republic, a government that they have invested blood and treasure for 20 years to help fulfill, the people's right and protect democracy. They started negotiating with the Taliban to exit from Afghanistan. And you know what is probably striking in those periods when we were engaging with American diplomats and we told them why you did not even include one word of human rights and women's rights in the Doha Agreement that you signed with the Taliban. The response we got was that these are domestic issues. For 20 years, we were told that we are here as international community to protect women's rights in Afghanistan. We are here to support you. All of a sudden, women's rights became only a matter of domestic issues for us. So you could see that there is a lot of contradiction in what was happening just to protect their own interest. And honestly speaking, sometimes I believe this is a big betrayal to us. So they negotiated with the Taliban, not even including one word of human rights in the Doha Agreement. If you look at Doha Agreement, probably you will find it online. There is no mention of the Taliban are responsible to protect women and human rights. All of a sudden, it became a matter of our internal issue. So then I noticed, as somebody who have not only spent my time, but as I said, invested my blood in Afghanistan, that it's time for us to take responsibility. I know that also in Northern Ireland, for instance, the women got together, established the first women political party to be part of the peace process. This is what we did. We got together, we made sure that we are heard, that we are part of the process. So there were 4 women. After all the advocacy and work and struggle that we put in place, we managed to bring 4 women in the negotiation from the Republic side out of 21 members of negotiation. I was one of them. Of course, I was delighted to be in that important position, sitting across the table with the Taliban that were not even regarding women as a human being. They don't regard you as a human being. Sometimes they put their gaze down because they don't want to look at you because they don't recognize you. And there you had to not only argue to challenge their narrative, but also to make yourself exist, to make yourself known. It is not an easy experience. It was not probably my experience, my best time of all my career to be in Doha for 1 year to talk with the Taliban, because every time I was going to that room was like my hand was also in cast because I was just my hand was injured just a month ago before the negotiation. So I was going to that room with that experience of also the weather was hot, but inside the rooms were cold, so my hand was always in pain. I went and and I looked at these people, and we negotiated. But what happened? That negotiation emboldened them. Ours was in a good faith. We wanted to end this conflict for a positive peace. But theirs was to buy time, to control. So we need to engage. Engagement, diplomacy is important, but who do we engage to? What are the principles? How do we ensure there is transparency? How do we ensure there is inclusivity? How do we ensure that victims of war are listened to? How do we ensure that this is owned and led by the people that are affected?
Thank you, Fawzia. I am going to bring the next round over to the audience to engage in the panel. So if anyone has any question, I can get a microphone sent around the room. Okay, so we'll go to Slido, and I think the producers will re-put the QR code up on the wall for those watching online. So the first question, a traumatized child isn't just a now problem, it affects both the country's future economic viability. How do we address this mental health tsunami? Mariam, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, that's a very important question, and I'm happy that it was asked, because we are talking a lot about children return, but not enough about the trauma that those children are going through, including the families, the mothers and grandmothers and families who are waiting for their children, sometimes for 3 years, without any support. So this is a very important question. And you know, it was ironic, because the fact that the Russians are using this trauma by actually justifying the deportation as being the one who are saving the children from the war. So let me just, before I lose you, or you lose me, but let me explain that, because this is a very important point which was politicized, mental health and traumatization of children. So the Ukrainian had the children deported because it was targeted by Russia. And they claimed that they have transferred and saved 700,000 children for medical reason or for safety. If it was the case, they would have applied the list that Geneva Convention has mentioned, which is very clear. I'm saying that loud now because I know that, and I hope that some countries are listening. Those who think that Russian Federation have saved those 700,000 children, you know that that's a lie, and I'm not scared to say that word. It's a complete lie, because if it was true, they would have followed the Geneva Convention, which lists 4 points. To immediately register the children with the Red Cross. Red Cross has no access to the information. To also give access, to transfer all information to the Ukrainian government or to the Ukrainian families. Russia hasn't done that. To also register the children with the agencies like UNICEF and Red Cross. They haven't done that. So everything they have done was the opposite. And this is, you can read that in the report that GLOBSEC has also mentioned, but also in the December 2024, a report which was drafted by Yale Humanitarian Research Lab, by Nathaniel Raymond. They found out that 314 children were given Russian nationality, Russian passports. Their name and details were shared in a Russian adoption database. Not with Ukrainian families, not with the Ukrainian government, with the Russian families and the Russian Federation. Their name were changed, passport were changed, and location moved to another place because they wanted to avoid detection.
Mariam.
But this war crime affects 1.6 million of children who will be deported, who will be adopted, and who will also be under occupation. So when we are talking about peace agreement, we should think about the traumatized children that the Russians are saying that they are saving from the world. Traumatized children needs more than a return. They really need to make sure that we put in place a proper mechanism of mental health program, counseling, integration into the society, because they will be transferred to places which are not theirs. So this is very, very important. And we are not there yet, again. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mariam. We do have one question in the audience, Martin. The microphone's coming.
Thank you, Martin Poliacik, both GLOBSEC and Emile Foundation. You started, Megan, with saying that in this transactional period of geopolitics, many of the stable pieces are not in place anymore. And the title of the panel says, is anything going to stay sacred? So my question to all the panelists is, how should we be looking for these pieces that should be untouchable in future geopolitics? If things like safety of children or not castrating prisoners of war or weaponizing sexual abuse of women should actually still be protected by something we call humanity as sacred, or anything goes in the new transactional politics?
Thank you. Tim, would you like to take that one?
That's a big one.
I know it's a very big one, but please brief, because we do have a few coming through on Slido.
Yeah, I'll be quick. So thanks for the question. The reality is, at the moment, there's roughly about 42 wars that are going on all across the world. The same modus operandi that we're seeing in Ukraine with Russia is happening across the world. This isn't unusual. You know, wars like South Sudan are not referenced in the world in the way that they should be, because of how the media is trained at certain conflicts and certain discussions that are going on. I think we are in a different paradigm, and there has been a paradigm shift. The Second World War saw that people would do anything to win a war, and holding those people accountable is something that we will need to do post this conflict and post every conflict. But I'm certainly of the opinion to say, when there is war, when there is famine, when there is a climate emergency, when there is mass migration, you have a vulnerability. And in that space of vulnerability, bad actors will act. They will do the worst that they possibly can, and they will exploit in a way. So I'm sorry to say that we live in a world that's not ideal. We live in a world that if we could design it again, it wouldn't include this. But the reality is we're through that looking glass now, and as a direct result, we're going to see this play out again and again and again, whether it's with China and Taiwan, whether it's in South Sudan, wherever you're seeing conflict. We saw it in, I've got about 100 staff on the ground in Uganda. We saw it in how the LRF were able to come in directly and use child soldiers in that space. So I think we're in a whole new world. That new world order is requiring us to think about it differently. And our response needs to not be the normal response. Our response needs to be resolute. So if we're going to hold to anything, it's that we have a determination that we can live in a world that is different, that we have everything within our power to be able to address this. But it requires people to not sit back, and it requires people to stand up and take action.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Fawzia, so the most logical one for you, I think, going on from the question that Tim had, is how do we address countries such as Afghanistan or Iran, arguing that us advocating for human rights in their countries is challenging their sovereignty?
Well, I think...
Thank you.
I think to compare the two situations is probably not a right comparison, because what's happening in Afghanistan probably does not happen anywhere in the world. Afghanistan has become an open prison for the women. Women cannot study, cannot work, cannot get out, cannot travel without male companion. Their voice is regarded as intimacy if they speak in the public. The whole being of women as a human beings is questioned. So probably there is no any other country in the world with such a comparison. So I don't think we can compare the two. However, I think we have a global responsibility. First of all, there are international institutions and conventions and organizations that are set up post World War II to protect the world order. There are some institutions like the ICC, the ICG, International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, the UN Charter, the regional organizations such as the OIC. These are responsible to ensure that the voiceless are heard. Now, people have started questioning at least from where I come from, women in Afghanistan have started losing faith over these institutions because it's been 4 years. The Taliban do not only deprive women from their basic fundamental human rights, they have completely erased media, censored media, civil society do not exist anymore. And if you speak even in social media, they go to find your comment and they chase you to find you in your house, and then they can either you disappear or they can just put you in solitary confinement. So this is, I think we have a global responsibility. We need to make sure that these institutions work. ICC, ICJ, before it happens to us. Because I believe we are living in a world where the problems are so distant. Until it doesn't come to our borders, we don't regard them as our problem. Until the Ukraine issue does not go to any borders, you don't regard it as your problem. Until another 11 September attack doesn't happen, Afghanistan is a forgotten war. I see a lot of questions about Afghanistan. One of the questions is positive peace possible? I think it's possible if we make sure that these institutions bring those who are violating human rights and committing crimes against humanity, by violating not only women's rights, but committing crimes against humanity by depriving women from accessing to resources. As a result, they lose their children because of hunger and poverty, because they don't have income and support to feed their children. So we need to make sure that these institutions are functioning, and also we need to make sure sovereignty is a very vague term, right? Yeah, we need to make sure that there is a process. There is a process that people's voices are heard. And this is the way forward for Afghanistan. We need to make sure that there is a political process that people are included into that.
Thank you so much. Mariam, I am going to ask you from Slido, how can regular citizens engage to help protect children?
Oh, very simple answer. And then I will go on again. But no, more seriously, what we are asking is to resonate what we are saying today and to talk about it louder and more louder. Us alone, you know, our voice might be strong today, tomorrow people will forget. And we need also to ask the citizen to put themselves into the situation of all the parents. I don't know if you're expecting a conclusion of the session, or if you just want me to tell the citizen what to do, but it's very simple. Just repeat what we are saying, advocate for those children, but not just for the Ukrainian children, also for the 2.5 million of girls who are denied education in Afghanistan, to thousands of children who are killed in South Sudan, to thousands of children who are killed in Gaza, to also 39 children who were killed in Israel, and so on and so on. Because those citizens who are asking the question, it's not numbers, it's figures, it's about a child, and it could be them. So we are not asking a lot, we are asking to speak up for them. And because those people cannot speak, those people are silenced, like in Afghanistan, they are silenced, they can't speak up, otherwise they get killed. So that's very, very important. But then I will be more disruptive and I will just take 30 seconds. Because all the people here in the room before you leave, and maybe you will report back to your world leaders, but I want to take something with you when you leave the room. Is when you go back to your countries, to your influence, because God knows how many people in this room could have thousands of networks of influence. And you will go back to your politics, which is different. Just ask yourself one question. What do you want the history to tell about you? That you choose the side of a child? Or that you were too busy and distracted by other political situations that you decided that you didn't have time to care about? That the complexity of the topic of children in armed conflicts was too complex to even try to find out what are the solutions? Or you want to say, I was really proud. I choose the side of a child, over politics, over the mineral deals, over the peace agreement, over influence, over the economical ties, because that's a problem for most countries. They don't want to take part because they have an economical relation. That's something you need to really keep in mind, because they are watching, all of them. Just be reassured that they're watching, they're listening, and they're waiting for you to do something.
Thank you, Mariam. So if you don't mind, I'm going to take closing remarks from the other two panelists. Tim, if you'd like to go first?
Yeah, I would say there's a kind of phrase, no one raindrop ever felt responsible for the flood. And as a direct result, you can sometimes feel that you are powerless and that you have nothing that you can contribute. When world powers are at play, how can we ever do something that's significant? There's a lady called Mariam, who was born in Northern Ireland, who, off the back of her background, she had, born in the 1700s, she hadn't the right to vote, hadn't the right to do anything really. And off the back of it, she abstained from eating sugar. She led a movement of women, so much so that the sugar sales in Belfast collapsed. She went on to lead with 2 men for Belfast to be the first port that would stop slave ships coming forward. And when Abraham Lincoln passed the Abolition Act, it was said that she would literally rugby tackle people before they would emigrate to the States. We need to have a spirit on us that actually the power that is within us can do something significant. That actually it's not someone else's responsibility, it's our responsibility. So I would encourage you, as you sit and listen to the amazing testimony to what is actually going on, don't be closed to the subject. See the power that you have to make a difference and get involved, whether it's with your time, your treasure, or your talent, because all 3 are your direct responsibilities. My final bit before passing is to say we both all have something unique about us, our fingerprints and our voice. We're waiting to see what you use your hands for and what you'll speak up for in the time that you have on this earth.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Probably what you hear about Afghanistan is usually a country that women are suppressed. But one thing that we don't talk about it is that women in Afghanistan had much more freedom before conflict. Women in Afghanistan got the right to vote before women in Switzerland did. But it's the conflict that did not only take lives, but freedom. So we must make sure that there is no conflict escalating anymore in the world, but it's happening because of exclusionary politics. Women in the new world order that is coming up have no space. So it's not only Afghanistan, it's the rest of the world. If we do not stop it now, it can come tomorrow. So what I would like to ask all of you is stand in solidarity with us today, because we are fighting for equality for all of you. Tomorrow will be too late. As they say, injustice anywhere could be injustice everywhere. We're a victim of injustice now, tomorrow it could be you. So let's unite, because there is an invisible power in unity.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking all of our panelists for their contributions today another time. It's just a note to say that please stay in your seats. There is another panel after this on the changing...